Welcome back to the channel everyone, and a very warm welcome to all the new viewers who are just discovering this space where we dive deep into the hidden stories, unbelievable facts, and jaw-dropping secrets behind everyday objects that can quietly be worth a fortune, because today we are stepping into one of the most fascinating and mysterious topics in the world of coin collecting. A topic that sounds impossible at first but becomes more believable the deeper you listen, as we explore the legendary idea of a 2000 1-cent coin that could be valued at an astonishing $16 million, a single penny that most people would overlook, toss into a jar, or spend without a second thought, yet under the right circumstances, with the right combination of minting errors, production mistakes, rare conditions, and historical coincidences, could transform into a life-changing treasure. And as you stay with this story from beginning to end, you will understand not only why such a coin could exist, but how mint errors happen, why they are so desirable, what collectors look for, and how a tiny piece of copper-plated zinc from the year 2000 could theoretically rise to such an unbelievable value, because the story of a high-value penny is never about just one mistake, it is about layers of errors stacked together in ways that were never meant to happen, beginning with the year itself, the year 2000, a symbolic milestone in human history when the world was transitioning into a new millennium, when mints were producing massive quantities of coins to meet circulation demand, often under intense pressure, and when the Denver Mint, marked with the D Mint mark, was striking hundreds of millions of Lincoln cents using high-speed presses, automated inspection, and materials that were already controversial among collectors. Because by 2000 the United States penny was no longer solid copper as it once was before 1982, but instead made of a zinc core with a thin copper plating. A composition that introduced an entirely new category of errors and failures that simply could not occur on older copper cents, and this change alone opened the door to plating blisters, exposed zinc cores, split planchets, missing copper layers, and dramatic visual flaws that could turn an ordinary cent into something extraordinary. But composition alone is never enough to reach million-dollar territory. So to understand how a 2000 penny could be worth $16 million, we must imagine a perfect storm of mistakes beginning with the planchet stage, where blank coin discs are prepared before striking, because if the wrong metal strip is fed into the blanking machine, or if a strip intended for another denomination or experimental alloy is mistakenly used, the resulting planchets would already be abnormal, lighter, heavier, softer, or harder than intended. And if such a planchet made its way into the Denver Mint cent presses in the year 2000, the resulting coin could display incorrect weight, unusual coloration, magnetic properties, or sound characteristics that immediately separate it from normal cents. And now imagine that this hypothetical 2000 penny was struck not only on an incorrect planchet, but on one that was originally intended for a different coin or was part of an experimental test run, something that is extremely rare but not impossible, especially during transitional periods when the mint evaluates new materials to reduce costs. And if such a coin were accidentally released into circulation rather than destroyed, its rarity would already be astronomical. But the story does not stop there, because next we must consider die errors, the engraved steel dies that imprint the design onto the planchet, and dies can suffer from cracks, breaks, chips, misalignments, doubling, and even catastrophic failures. And a 2000 penny struck with a severely doubled die obverse could show dramatic doubling on Lincoln's portrait, the date, the mint mark, and the inscriptions, creating a bold, naked-eye visible doubling that collectors dream of, far beyond the subtle machine doubling seen on common coins. And if this doubling were combined with a rotated reverse, where the back of the coin is misaligned relative to the front, or a misaligned die strike where part of the design is missing or off-center, the visual impact would be stunning. And such combinations are almost unheard of, because usually quality control catches extreme errors. Yet under high production demands, a damaged die can strike thousands of coins before being replaced, and if one coin from that batch also happened to be struck off-center by a significant margin, showing a full date and mint mark while missing part of the design, collectors would consider it a major error. But we are still building toward that $16 million valuation, because now imagine that during the striking process, the coin experienced a multiple strike error, being struck more than once by the dies, with each strike slightly rotated or offset, creating a layered ghost-like image of Lincoln and the reverse memorial or shield, a chaotic but fascinating result of mechanical failure, and if this multiple strike occurred while the planchet was partially outside the collar, the coin could expand irregularly, showing broad-struck characteristics combined with overlapping designs. Something so visually complex that experts would immediately recognize it as a once-in-a-generation error, and now add yet another layer, a die cap error, where a coin sticks to one of the dies and repeatedly strikes subsequent planchets, gradually forming a cap shape, and while most die cap coins are recognizable and somewhat common among error collectors, a partial die cap combined with a normal strike on the opposite side could create a coin with one side heavily distorted and the other relatively normal. And if such a coin retained the 2000 date and D-mint mark clearly, it would be identifiable and traceable to its origin. But what truly pushes a coin into the realm of legendary value is not just the presence of errors, but the uniqueness of their combination, because collectors will pay premiums for rarity, but they will pay extraordinary sums for uniqueness, the idea that no other coin like it exists, and if this hypothetical 2000D penny combined an off-metal planchet, a dramatic double die obverse, a misaligned or rotated reverse, multiple strikes, and partial die cap characteristics, all while retaining enough detail to confirm its authenticity, it would defy conventional classification, forcing grading services and numismatic experts to document it as a one-of-one anomaly, and when something cannot be easily categorized, its mystique grows, and mystique drives value, especially when paired with historical significance. And the year 2000 carries a psychological weight that adds to its appeal, because millennium-dated items have always attracted attention, from stamps to medals to commemoratives, and while billions of 2000D cents were struck, none were intended to be extraordinary, which makes the idea of one slipping through with unimaginable errors even more compelling, but we must also consider condition, because even the most dramatic error loses value if heavily worn or damaged. So for a 2000D penny to reach $16 million, it would need to survive in an unusually high state of preservation, perhaps discovered early and stored unknowingly in a roll, a bank bag, or a collection jar, protected from corrosion, scratches, and circulation wear, and if such a coin were later submitted to a top-tier grading service and authenticated as genuine, with a clear explanation of its errors and an official grade, the market reaction would be explosive, because authentication transforms a curiosity into an asset. And now imagine the auction scenario, where wealthy collectors, museums, and private investors compete for ownership of something that represents the ultimate mint mistake, a physical embodiment of human error within a highly controlled industrial process, and such bidding wars have happened before in the numismatic world, with rare coins selling for millions not because of their metal content, but because of their stories, and stories matter deeply in collecting, because a coin that tells a story of failure, chance, and survival becomes more than money, it becomes history, and the story of a 2000D penny worth $16 million would include not just the technical details of its errors, but the mystery of how it escaped detection, who first noticed it, how many hands it passed through unnoticed, and how close it came to being lost forever, because every rare coin has a survival story, and the closer it comes to destruction, the more powerful that story becomes. And we must also consider the role of misinformation and speculation, because part of what drives value in hypothetical ultra-rare coins is the possibility, the idea that somewhere out there, perhaps in a jar, drawer, or forgotten box, such a coin could exist, and that possibility fuels treasure hunting behavior, encouraging people to examine their change more carefully. And while not every story of $1 million penny is true, the reality is that mint errors do exist, valuable ones do surface. And history has shown time and again that the mint is not infallible, because human systems, no matter how automated, can fail, and when they do, they sometimes create artifacts that are more valuable than gold, and when collectors talk about a $16 million penny, they are not just talking about a coin, they are talking about the extreme end of probability, where multiple rare conditions intersect, and while the chances are incredibly small, they are not zero. Next. 2007 D1 cent, today because what we are about to explore is one of the most fascinating, controversial, and imagination-stretching stories in the modern world of coin collecting, a story that turns a tiny everyday object into a symbol of hidden fortune, mystery, and possibility, and that object is the 2007 1-cent coin, a humble penny that, according to extraordinary claims, collector legends, error coin theories, and speculative valuations, has been whispered about as being worth as much as $14 million, and before anyone dismisses this outright, today's journey is not about blindly believing a single headline or rumor but about understanding how such an astonishing value could even be discussed in the first place, how minting errors, production anomalies, transitional metal mistakes, die varieties, experimental planchets, undocumented test strikes, and unique historical circumstances can transform a coin that once bought nothing more than a moment's attention into an object that could theoretically command a life-changing price. So settle in, imagine holding a penny that looks ordinary at first glance, and let's dive deeply into the errors, mistakes, and possibilities that surround the legendary idea of the 2007 1-cent being worth big money, because in the world of numismatics, reality often begins with improbability and sometimes history hides its greatest treasures in plain sight. The year 2007 itself sits at an interesting point in United States mint history because it followed the early 2000s period of rising metal prices, cost-cutting measures, increased automation, and experimentation in minting processes, all of which created an environment where mistakes could occur more easily than collectors might assume, especially when millions upon millions of pennies were being struck at high speed. The Denver Mint, marked with the D Mint mark, was producing vast quantities of Lincoln cents using copper-plated zinc planchets, yet throughout mint history there have been moments where wrong planchets entered presses, dies were mismatched, test materials were struck accidentally, or quality control failed to catch a tiny but crucial detail, and when those mistakes escape the mint and enter circulation they become instant rarities, not because of their age but because of their uniqueness, and uniqueness is the ultimate driver of value in collectibles. Now when people hear a figure like $14 million attached to a penny, skepticism is natural. But numismatic history provides precedent for coins reaching staggering values due to extreme rarity and error combinations, such as the 1943 copper cent, the 1944 steel cent, the 1955 double die cent, and more recently experimental and transitional errors that have sold for hundreds of thousands or even millions. So the question becomes not is 14 million common or realistic for a normal penny, but what combination of factors could theoretically push a 2007 1-cent into that stratosphere. One of the most frequently discussed possibilities involves a wrong planchet strike, where a penny intended to be struck on a copper-plated zinc planchet is instead struck on a planchet meant for another denomination or even another metal composition entirely. Imagine for a moment a 2007 Lincoln cent struck on a solid copper planchet of a different alloy, or on a planchet intended for a foreign coin, or even on an experimental composition that was never officially released. If such a coin existed and could be proven through metallurgical testing and mint documentation, its uniqueness alone could drive its value into seven figures or beyond, especially if it were the only known example. Another layer of possibility comes from transitional errors, where dies or planchets from one era mistakenly carry over into another, such as leftover experimental materials or test dies from research into alternative metals. During the mid-2000s, the U.S. Mint was actively studying ways to reduce the cost of producing cents because the face value of a penny was approaching or even falling below its production cost, which opened the door to experimental strikes, internal testing, and trial compositions. If a 2007 cent were struck on one of these experimental planchets and accidentally released, it would represent a tangible artifact of mint research that was never meant for the public, and collectors pay extraordinary premiums for coins that were never supposed to exist outside mint walls. Another dramatic error category is the mule, a coin struck with mismatched dies from different denominations or designs. While no officially confirmed 2007 cent mule is known, the mere theoretical existence of a Lincoln cent obverse paired with an unexpected reverse or incorrect date configuration would be monumental. Mule coins are among the most famous and valuable errors in numismatics because they represent a complete breakdown in minting protocol, requiring multiple independent failures to occur simultaneously. A 2007 mule involving the Lincoln cent could easily become one of the most famous error coins ever discovered, especially if it were unique. Then there are die errors, which at first might sound minor but can reach extreme values when they are dramatic enough, such as massive double dies, rotated dies far beyond tolerance, missing mint marks where one should exist, extra mint marks, or even over mint marks that theoretically should not appear in modern coinage. A 2007 D cent with a dramatic double die affecting the date, mint mark, and inscription simultaneously could become iconic, particularly if it escaped early detection and only a handful or even a single example survived. Die cracks, die cuds, and retained cuds can also become valuable when they are severe, covering large portions of the design and creating a visually striking error that tells a story of a die failing under immense pressure. Another possibility that fuels high valuations is the concept of a perfect storm error, where multiple major errors appear on the same coin, such as a wrong planchet combined with an off-center strike and a double die. Errors of this magnitude are exponentially rarer than single-error coins, because the probability of all those mistakes aligning is incredibly low, and when such coins are authenticated, they often become centerpiece items in elite collections. The hypothetical $14 million valuation attached to the 2007 D cent often comes from imagining such a perfect storm scenario, where the coin is not merely an error but a once-in-a-generation anomaly. Condition also plays a critical role in these valuations, because a coin with even the rarest error can lose significant value if it is heavily damaged, while an error coin preserved in pristine mint state condition, with full original luster and no post-mint damage, becomes exponentially more desirable. If a unique 2007 D error cent were discovered in near-perfect condition, perhaps saved unknowingly in a roll or mint bag, it could command a premium far beyond what a circulated example would achieve. Provenance adds another layer, because collectors value a well-documented history of ownership, discovery, and authentication. A 2007 D cent discovered by a mint employee whistleblower, or found in an original sealed mint bag with documentation, would carry an aura of legitimacy and intrigue that could drive bidding wars. The story behind a coin often matters almost as much as the coin itself, and in some cases even more. Another factor that fuels extreme valuations is media attention and cultural impact. When a coin becomes famous beyond the numismatic community, attracting interest from investors, museums, and the general public, its price can escalate rapidly. Headlines about a penny worth millions capture imagination and draw new money into the market, which can inflate prices well beyond traditional collector metrics. If a 2007 D cent were to be authenticated as a unique, undocumented mint error and publicized widely, it could become a cultural icon similar to the 1933 Double Eagle, whose value is tied not only to its rarity but to its dramatic story and legal history. Speaking of legality, the question of whether such a coin was legally released also matters, because coins that were never officially authorized for circulation can face government claims, which paradoxically can increase their fame and value. Even if ownership is contested, the debate itself becomes part of the coin's mystique. In the case of the hypothetical $14 million 2007 D cent, part of its allure lies in the mystery, the what-ifs, and the possibility that such a coin could still be out there, hiding in a jar of spare change, a forgotten roll, or a dusty drawer. This treasure hunt aspect keeps collectors searching through modern cents with magnifying glasses and scales, weighing, measuring, and examining each one for anomalies, because unlike ancient or medieval coins, modern error coins offer the tantalizing idea that anyone could find one without needing to travel or spend a fortune up front. Just knowledge, patience, and attention to detail. Critics rightly point out that no publicly verified sale of a 2007 D cent for $14 million has occurred, and that is an important distinction. But in numismatics, theoretical value discussions are not uncommon, especially when based on hypothetical uniqueness combined with precedent-setting prices for other coins. Valuation is not only about past sales but about what the right buyer might pay for the right coin under the right circumstances. And when you imagine a coin that is one of one, tied to modern mint experimentation, preserved in perfect condition, authenticated by top grading services, and backed by a compelling story, the ceiling becomes difficult to define. Next, 2014 D1 cent. Today we are diving into one of the most fascinating and talked about modern coin stories in recent memory, a story that blends mystery, minting science, collector psychology, and the thrilling idea that something as small and ordinary as a 1-cent coin could theoretically be worth as much as $15 million. And the coin at the center of this conversation is the 2014 D1 cent, a Lincoln penny that on the surface looks like nothing more than spare change, but beneath that copper-colored exterior lies a universe of possibilities driven by errors, mistakes, anomalies, and rare circumstances that could elevate its value into the realm of legendary numismatic prizes. So let's settle in and explore how such a coin could command attention, speculation, and astronomical price tags, because understanding this story is not just about money but about how rarity is born, how errors happen, and how collectors assign value based on a perfect storm of conditions that sometimes only occur once in a generation, starting with the basics of the 2014 D1 cent, which was struck at the Denver Mint during a time when the United States Mint was producing billions of pennies each year using zinc planchets coated with copper, a process that itself introduces opportunities for mistakes at multiple stages including blank preparation, plating, striking pressure, die alignment, die maintenance, and quality control, and while most of these coins were produced flawlessly and entered circulation unnoticed, the sheer scale of production means that even a tiny fraction of errors can result in extremely rare survivors, and when those errors are dramatic, undocumented, or tied to transitional or experimental processes, the numismatic world pays very close attention. One of the most important possibilities that fuels the idea of a $15 million 2014 D penny is the concept of a wrong planchet error, which occurs when a coin is struck on a metal blank intended for a different denomination or composition, and while this may sound unlikely, history proves it has happened before with some of the most famous error coins ever known, and if a 2014 D1 cent were somehow struck on a planchet made of a precious metal like silver, gold, or even an experimental alloy never meant for circulation, the resulting coin would instantly become unique or nearly unique, especially if confirmed by metallurgical testing and authenticated by top grading services, and rarity combined with a dramatic visual difference and an ironclad chain of authentication is exactly the type of scenario that drives values into the millions. Another powerful factor lies in the possibility of a transitional error, where old and new materials or designs overlap during production changes, and although the penny's composition officially changed long before 2014, rumors and speculation within collector circles often point to experimental testing of alternative metals due to rising production costs, and if even a handful of experimental blanks were accidentally struck with regular dies and released, those coins would represent tangible evidence of a secretive process normally hidden from the public, and the discovery of such a piece would not just be a collectible but a historical artifact, pushing value far beyond normal market logic. Then there are dramatic die errors which include double dies, especially those that show extreme doubling visible to the naked eye across the date, mint mark, inscriptions, or Lincoln's portrait, and while minor doubling is relatively common and usually worth modest premiums, a truly spectacular double die with full separation and strong relief can turn an ordinary penny into a 6- or 7-figure coin, and if such doubling appeared on a low survival population 2014 D issue with no prior examples known, competitive bidding among elite collectors could push prices into unprecedented territory, especially if the error challenged existing classifications or revealed a previously unknown stage of die production, adding to the mystique and academic importance of the coin. Another error category that fuels high valuation theories is the off-metal or missing layer error, particularly relevant to modern zinc pennies which rely on a thin copper plating, because when that plating is partially or completely missing, the coin takes on a silvery or gray appearance that immediately stands out, and while many missing plating errors exist and usually sell for modest sums, a completely unplated 2014 D penny in pristine condition with full mint luster, sharp strike, and flawless surfaces would be exponentially rarer than common examples, and if paired with other errors like a broad strike, off-center strike, or wrong die pairing, the rarity multiplies, creating a compound error that collectors prize above all else. One of the most intriguing possibilities involves a mule error, which occurs when obverse and reverse dies not intended to be paired together are mistakenly used, and while extremely rare in modern coinage, mules are among the most famous and valuable errors in existence, and a 2014 D1 cent mule paired with a die from a different denomination, year, or even a proof design would instantly rewrite numismatic textbooks, especially if it escaped the mint unnoticed. And the shockwave such a discovery would send through the collector community cannot be overstated because it would represent a systemic failure at multiple levels of mint quality control, making the coin not just rare but legendary. Then there is the idea of a perfect storm error where multiple anomalies occur simultaneously, such as a wrong planchet combined with a double strike, rotated die, and off-center alignment, producing a visually stunning piece that looks almost unreal. And coins like this often captivate even non-collectors because they visibly demonstrate how fragile and complex the minting process truly is, and when a coin tells such a dramatic story through its physical characteristics alone, its appeal transcends traditional collecting categories and enters the realm of museum-worthy artifacts. Another layer that adds to the hypothetical $15 million valuation is provenance. Because if a 2014 D penny with extreme errors were discovered by an ordinary person in circulation and documented from the moment of discovery through authentication and auction, the human story behind it would amplify its allure. Collectors do not just buy metal, they buy stories, and a coin pulled from pocket change that turns out to be a once-in-a-lifetime error embodies the dream that fuels the hobby itself, making bidders willing to stretch far beyond rational price guides. Condition also plays a critical role because modern coins with errors often survive in circulated states. So an uncirculated or near-perfect example dramatically increases desirability, and when grading services certify such a coin at the highest levels while confirming the authenticity of the errors, confidence in the market skyrockets, enabling record-breaking sales. Speculation around secret mint tests, undocumented die trials, or experimental finishes further adds to the mystique because the United States Mint does not publicly disclose every internal experiment. And history has shown that accidental releases do happen, and when evidence surfaces decades later, it forces a re-evaluation of what collectors thought they knew, and that uncertainty combined with physical proof is a powerful driver of value. The psychological aspect of collecting cannot be ignored either because elite collectors and investors often compete not just to own a rare object but to own the rarest example of its kind, and when two or more wealthy individuals decide that a particular coin represents the pinnacle of modern era collecting, bidding wars can push prices to levels that seem irrational to outsiders but make perfect sense within that competitive environment, and in such cases the final price reflects not just rarity but ego, prestige, and the desire to secure a permanent place in numismatic history. The $15 million figure attached to a 2014 D penny should therefore be understood not as a guaranteed price tag but as a theoretical ceiling based on the most extreme and unlikely combination of factors, including unprecedented errors, absolute uniqueness, flawless condition, verified provenance, and intense demand among top-tier collectors. And even the discussion of such value serves an important purpose because it encourages people to look more closely at the coins they handle every day, to learn about minting processes, and to appreciate that mistakes, while rare, are an inherent part of mass production, and sometimes those mistakes create objects of extraordinary interest and value. So whether or not such a 2014 D1 cent currently exists, the possibility alone keeps the hobby alive and thriving, reminding us that history can still be found in our pockets, that the smallest denomination can carry the biggest stories, and that the next legendary discovery might be waiting quietly in a jar of change, unnoticed until someone takes the time to look. And that is why stories like this continue to captivate audiences, spark debate, and inspire collectors around the world to keep searching, learning, and dreaming about the incredible potential hidden within the simplest of coins. Last 1995 D1 cent, today, because once again we are diving into one of the most unbelievable, fascinating, and imagination-fueling stories in the world of coin collecting, a story that proves that even the smallest piece of change in your pocket can carry a legend worth millions. And today our focus is the 1995 D1 cent coin. A penny that at first glance looks no different from billions of others but that has become the center of extraordinary claims suggesting it could be worth as much as $10 million due to rare errors, minting mistakes, and remarkable possibilities. And before anyone rushes to dismiss this idea as impossible, it is important to understand that numismatics is a field where history, science, human error, and rarity intersect in unpredictable ways, where a fraction of a millimeter, a wrong metal, or a mismatched die can elevate a coin from pocket change to museum-level treasure. So as we begin this journey together, imagine holding a single 1995 D penny in your hand, minted in Denver, mass-produced during a year when pennies were often overlooked and undervalued, and yet within that massive production run there exists the potential for anomalies so rare and so significant that they could redefine what collectors believe is possible. The year 1995 sits in an interesting era of U.S. mint operations because it was a time of high-speed production, increasing reliance on automated systems, and continued pressure to keep costs down as metal prices fluctuated. Pennies at that time were composed of a zinc core plated with copper, a composition introduced in the early 1980s to save money, and while this process was well established by 1995, it was not immune to mistakes, especially when millions of planchets were being prepared, transported, and fed into presses every day. And it is precisely within these complex industrial processes that rare and valuable errors can occur. One of the most talked about possibilities behind a $10 million valuation for a 1995 D1 cent is a wrong planchet error of extreme rarity, where the penny is struck not on the standard copper-plated zinc planchet but on a planchet intended for another denomination or another purpose entirely. Imagine a 1995 D Lincoln cent struck on a solid copper planchet of a pre-1982 alloy, or on a bronze alloy reserved for foreign coinage, or even on an experimental composition created during internal mint testing. Such a coin would immediately stand apart not only in weight and color but in historical significance, because it would represent a breach in mint protocol that allowed the wrong material to be struck and released into circulation. Wrong planchet errors are among the most valuable categories in numismatics, and when they involve modern coins and unexpected metals they can reach staggering prices. Another powerful possibility lies in transitional errors, which occur when materials, dyes, or processes from one era overlap incorrectly with another. While the official transition from copper to zinc had occurred years earlier, leftover materials, test planchets, or experimental blanks could theoretically still exist within mint facilities, especially during periods of research into alternative metals, and if a 1995 D cent were struck on such a transitional or experimental planchet, it would become a physical record of a process that was never meant to leave the mint. Collectors place immense value on coins that reveal hidden chapters of mint history, particularly when documentation is scarce or non-existent, adding to the coin's mystique. Die errors also play a major role in the legend of a high-value 1995 D cent, and among these, doubled dies are perhaps the most famous, because they are visually dramatic and historically important. The 1995 Philadelphia doubled die cent is already well known among collectors for its strong doubling on the obverse inscriptions, but imagine a similar or even more dramatic doubled die occurring at the Denver Mint, especially one affecting not only the lettering but the date, mint mark, and portrait simultaneously. Such a coin would instantly become one of the most important modern error cents ever discovered, especially if it were unique or if only a handful of examples existed. The value of doubled die coins increases exponentially with the strength of the doubling and the rarity of the variety, and a hypothetical 1995 D doubled die of extreme magnitude could easily command prices far beyond typical error coins. Another category that fuels high valuations is the mule error, a coin struck using mismatched dies that were never intended to be paired together. Mule coins are incredibly rare because they require multiple independent failures in die handling and installation, and while mule errors are more commonly discussed in relation to higher denominations, the existence of a 1995 D cent mule involving an incorrect reverse or a mismatched design would be unprecedented and monumental. Such a discovery would likely make headlines far beyond the numismatic community and attract interest from collectors, investors, and institutions worldwide. Off-metal strikes combined with other errors further expand the realm of possibility, because when multiple errors occur on a single coin, their rarity multiplies rather than adds. Imagine a 1995 D cent struck on a wrong planchet, off-center, with a rotated die and a doubled inscription. Such a combination would be almost statistically impossible, and yet numismatic history has shown that perfect storm errors do occur, albeit extremely rarely. Coins like this are often considered priceless until they are sold, because there is no direct comparison to establish a market value. Another factor that can elevate a coin into the multi-million-dollar range is condition, because rarity alone is not always enough. A unique error preserved in pristine mint state condition with full original luster and no Post-mint damage becomes exponentially more desirable, especially for modern coins where collectors expect sharp details and minimal wear. If a hypothetical $10 million 1995 D cent were discovered in near-perfect condition, perhaps saved unknowingly in an original roll or mint bag, it would stand as a once-in-a-generation find. Provenance and documentation add yet another layer of value, because collectors want to know where a coin came from, how it was discovered, and how it has been handled over time. A 1995 D cent discovered by a mint employee, or traced back to a specific production batch, or accompanied by metallurgical test results and expert authentication, would carry a level of credibility that could justify extraordinary prices. The role of third-party grading and authentication cannot be overstated in such cases, because without independent verification, even the most remarkable coin remains a curiosity rather than a confirmed treasure. Advanced testing techniques, such as X-ray fluorescence, allow experts to analyze metal composition without damaging the coin, providing scientific proof that supports claims of wrong planchets or experimental alloys, and such data can transform skepticism into acceptance within the numismatic community. Another element that contributes to extreme valuations is narrative, because collectors are not just buying metal discs, they are buying stories, and a coin tied to a compelling narrative of minting mistakes, hidden history, and near-mythical rarity becomes far more desirable than an otherwise similar object without context. The idea of a 1995 D penny worth $10 million captures attention precisely because it challenges assumptions about value, reminding people that rarity is not always about age, but about survival and uniqueness. Media attention can further amplify this effect, because once a coin becomes famous beyond collector circles, it attracts new buyers with different motivations and financial resources. Investors, museums, and even private foundations may compete for ownership, driving prices far beyond traditional numismatic benchmarks. History offers examples of coins whose values were propelled by fame as much as by rarity, and a legendary 1995 D cent could follow a similar path. Legal considerations can also play a role, because coins that were never intended for circulation may face questions of ownership, and while this can complicate matters, it can also increase a coin's notoriety and allure. As controversy often fuels interest, the possibility that such a valuable penny could still be undiscovered adds another layer of excitement, because unlike ancient coins locked away in museums or private collections, modern-era coins can still emerge from everyday change, fueling the belief that anyone, anywhere, could make a life-changing discovery. This democratizing aspect of modern numismatics is part of what keeps people searching through rolls of pennies, weighing them, examining them under magnification, and learning the subtle signs of genuine errors. Skeptics rightly note that no publicly verified sale of a 1995 D cent for $10 million has occurred, and that is an important distinction, but theoretical valuations are not uncommon in the collecting world, especially when discussing hypothetical coins that combine extreme rarity, historical significance, and pristine condition. Value in collectibles is ultimately determined by what a buyer is willing to pay, and when the right coin meets the right buyer under the right circumstances, records can be shattered. The legend of a $10 million 1995 D penny persists because it is grounded in real possibilities, not fantasy. Every error type discussed has precedent, every valuation logic has historical examples. What remains uncertain is whether all those elements have ever converged in a single coin.